Welcome to the WWE Podcast, the most passionate and authentic wrestling analysis on the web. We've got you covered with every Raw, SmackDown, and NXT show, giving you a no bullshit opinion. We know you love wrestling. We do too. So let's get this show underway.
And that's the bottom line. What? 'Cause Stone Cold said so.
Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome back to another edition of Rivalries on the WWE Podcast. It is Friday, January 22nd. 22nd. Wow, easy enough for me to say, eh? As we are just 9 days away from the Royal Rumble, and my God, it's crazy. Maybe it's because there's no fans or what have you, but it just does not feel like Royal Rumble season to me yet. But I know that once the Rumble comes and goes, it will certainly feel just as normal as always. And some pretty good news in WWE land this week, as we found out that, well, at least it's rumored that WWE will have some fans in the building for WrestleMania in Tampa Bay this year. And look, obviously, I expect them to take all necessary health precautions and all of their proper protocols to make sure everyone is safe. But I'm ready to have some crowds back in the stands for whether it be WWE or football or basketball, the NHL. I'm a big hockey guy, and I got to say that with, about 90% of the teams having absolutely no fans and the other small percentage having extremely limited capacity, it is very, very kind of discouraging almost to watching your product, as it really is the lifeblood to live sports and live entertainment, if you want to branch that all the way to WWE. And I'm just very, very anxious for WWE and all those major sports to get fans back in the crowd safely, of course, because obviously safety and the health of the population is paramount above all else. But I think that in the not-so-distant future, hopefully by the summer, we will get to at least near capacity in all these stadiums, especially open venues, as opposed to closed arenas, let's say where the NBA or the NHL teams play. But one thing is for certain, is that when the rivalry took place that we are covering today, fans were packed in the arenas, and that was for Brock Lesnar versus Triple H that started in 2012 following WrestleMania 28 and spilled all the way until the following WrestleMania in New York when they collided in a no-holds-barred match in one of, as WWE likes to bill, one of the main events for WrestleMania 29. And we will get into that in just a bit, but as per usual, I like to touch on the current product. And look, I gotta say, WWE is doing the best they can over on Monday Night Raw without their main attraction and world champion in Drew McIntyre. I feel like Alexa Bliss is doing a great job trying to keep the storyline relevant between Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. The whole Randy Orton mask thing, I'm intrigued by it. I'm wondering where they're going to go with it. I'm wondering what they could possibly do with Randy Orton after this program, because now that he has third-degree burns and he's arguably as twisted as ever, and to be quite honest, I don't even know how you could argue it in a lot of ways, I don't really know what they're going to do with Randy Orton after this program with The Fiend and Alexa Bliss is done. Because, don't get me wrong, the promo was very intriguing. It was polarizing. I had to rewind it a couple times just to make sure I was actually watching WWE. It was almost like I was watching Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was very, very cryptic, and I gotta say that it's incredible the kind of run that Randy Orton has been on over the last 12 months after just being an upper mid-card guy over on SmackDown for the better part of, 2 or 3 years. I know he had a month-long run with the WWE Championship in the spring of 2017, but he quickly dropped that belt to Jinder Mahal. You know, I just never expected Randy Orton to put in the kind of run he has been on over the course of 2020 and now a month into 2021. But as for this specific pay-per-view, look, I've said numerous times that the one thing about this program is that I have a hard time with the hokiness. We saw it a bit more from Alexa Bliss this week about how, she won the match and then the screen kind of changes and she's dressed differently. And I think that WWE is kind of doing themselves a disservice here because once they get back in front of a live audience, they're not going to be able to pull stuff like this. They're not going to be able to continue to go down this road of hocus pocus, shooting fireballs into people's faces, lighting people on fire, changing your outfit on, basically through teleportation, I guess. But look, I'm not saying I don't like the story, but I just don't know how you continue this trend into 2021 for much longer when we are presumably preparing to have fans back in the building, at least in some capacity, by WrestleMania season. And you would figure that those numbers inside arenas are only going to grow as we get further and further along into 2021 and vaccinations roll out and herd immunity and all that fun stuff that we have been accustomed to hearing during the pandemic. So look, I'm not a big fan of the hocus pocus stuff that has been an integral part of this storyline with Orton and Bliss and Wyatt, but I can't deny how great the storytelling has been. I like that they're kind of teetering on the brink of PG-14. I could appreciate that. I just think that they should try and start moving more in a direction of realism, something more realistic that you can continue to portray once fans are there live in the stands, that you can't just use, the Thunderdome and the special effects to further the storyline and the program. So I'm hoping that in the near future they kind of move away from the magic stuff and get more into a realistic type of happenings in this program. I'll move over to SmackDown as we got the news that it will, in fact, be Kevin Owens against Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble in a last man standing match. And look, I know some people may have been disappointed that it was more intriguing to have Adam Pearce in there as opposed to yet another match with Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens. But look, I said it last week. I think that this is the proper decision. I think that you typically have 3 matches that blow off a program. That seems to kind of be the rule of thumb in WWE. And I would like to see, and full disclosure here, I think Roman Reigns is going to win. And even though I love Kevin Owens, and I do think that he deserves a world championship run in some point in the near future, I think that it's criminal that he's only had one Universal Championship run, and we are I guess now we're 4 years removed from that. How crazy is that? WrestleMania 33 was 4 years ago. My God. But anyway, I think that Kevin Owens deserves another run with either the Universal Championship or the WWE Championship. I think he's found his niche over on SmackDown. I think that he should stay there. I think Raw is stacked with talent, and he would just be buried on that side of the roster. So I hope he sticks with SmackDown for a while. He's been one of those guys I've brought up before that he has changed brands almost at every single draft or shakeup or whatever you want to call it. It seems like every single year Kevin Owens is the guy who swaps to whatever brand he isn't on at that current moment. He started out on Raw, immediately went to SmackDown, had that year-long feud with AJ Styles over the United States Championship, then feuded with Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan that eventually got him kicked off of SmackDown, went back to Monday Night Raw, then he went back to SmackDown to feud with Kofi Kingston, went back to Raw to feud with Seth Rollins, now he's back on SmackDown. I just think they need to take a deep breath with Kevin Owens and push him as one of the faces of SmackDown, because I feel like that they have gone away like they had, let's say, a few years back or 15, 16 years ago of building brand stars, like brands that are synonymous with their respective superstars, rather, that are synonymous with their respective brands. I think they've done that with Roman Reigns. I think they've done that with Drew McIntyre, although I'm worried they're going to send him to SmackDown. And I think Kevin Owens is another guy that you're going to have to build as an integral part of SmackDown, a face of SmackDown. Monday Night Raw, you had guys like Seth Rollins who were always big parts of Monday Night Raw. he was always the face of Monday Night Raw. I think now they're doing a good job in building the Hurt Business as big faces of Monday Night Raw. Keith Lee, Braun Strowman whenever he returns. They have to do the same with Kevin Owens over on SmackDown. And look, I'm not saying that he's going to win the Universal Championship, but I mean, at the bare minimum, I think he deserves an Intercontinental Championship run. Obviously, Big E is on a good run with that. But I think a mid-card championship run in the near future it really should at least, at bare minimum, be in the cards for Kevin Owens. But Big E is a good segue. I haven't talked a lot about Big E, but look, I know he hasn't completely dropped the New Day gimmick, but at the same time, I think that would be a disservice to him because the way he blossomed under the New Day umbrella is what got him to this mega popularity that you see today among the WWE fans. And I actually really like what they're doing with Big E. I think that eventually we're going to have to start creeping towards a bit more seriousness, but it can't just be turning on a dime. And I think to this point, they've really done a good job with Big E. I like that they're making the Intercontinental Championship relevant because as much as I love Sami Zayn as the heel Intercontinental Champion, I felt that as soon as he got that belt and he won the triple threat ladder match between AJ Styles and Jeff Hardy, that title just got lost in obscurity, and we didn't see it for the better part of 3 months until Big E kind of forced himself into that picture. And I think now that you see Apollo Crews turning heel, that's a big thing. Like, you've seen what turning heel did for random lower mid-card guys in Mustafa Ali, although Retribution is a tire fire. But Mustafa Ali's character has certainly improved since he turned heel. Cedric Alexander, the most relevant he has been since he jumped up onto the main roster a year and a half ago. So look, I think that doing this character shift for Apollo Crews would boost him into relevancy and the most he has been. And I think him talking to Roman Reigns, kind of Roman Reigns getting in the ear of him, trying to, sway him in the wrong direction, in a heel direction. I think it's really smart because I gotta say, I would like to see Roman Reigns get a bit more lackeys. I know what I'm about to say may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm starting to get a bit tired of Jey Uso. I know it's supposed to be, like, he's supposed to annoy me and he's supposed to get on my nerves and this, that, and the other thing, but I feel like it's just kind of getting redundant with Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman and Jey Uso just walking out to the ring to open every single Friday Night SmackDown. And I think if you incorporated an Apollo Crews as like a lackey or just a distant acquaintance of this small little faction that we have going with Roman Reigns right now, I think that would be really intriguing. And look, I still like what Jey Uso's doing, but I think that if they could kind of just pull it back a bit, not expose him as much, and maybe use Apollo Crews in a similar role, it would go a long way. And like, we've seen how good factions have worked for other superstars. I just brought up Cedric Alexander in the Hurt Business, Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, MVP. Like, factions go a long way, and I've said for a while that I think that Roman Reigns could use a faction, and I reference it being the Hurt Business, but Apollo Crews is a very good available wrestler right now who could just be part of his group. And even if they don't want to make it a concrete every week type of thing, but just as a distance acquaintance that will come in to help and whatnot, and it would give a bit of less exposure to Jey Uso, which I feel in recent weeks Jey Uso's exposure has just been kind of redundant, and it's been a bit too much. And a big part of my issues with Jey Uso is I feel like his matches are very one-dimensional. Like, the amount of uppercut slaps and super kicks he does in a match, like, I get so irritated with it. It feels like that's the only, like, those are his only moves in his offensive arsenal. Look, again, I like Jey Uso. It's not go away heat quite yet, but I think that if they were just to kind of shield him a bit more, it would go a long way and not really beat this thing to death. But going back to the Intercontinental Championship picture, I think that one thing, they got to stop doing these championship matches every week. That is really not good. And I really hope that they could get away from that in the near future. But at least the championship is being built to be relevant. And you see now Apollo Crews getting the championship match against Big E next week. I'm hoping that maybe they'll incorporate Baron Corbin as a big opponent for Big E closer to WrestleMania. I think that would be a good feud because Baron Corbin right now is just lost in this waste of a program with the Mysterio family. And I'm not going to go into yet another rant about the Mysterio family, but I'll just give my quick 2 cents on it. They really just have to go away. Like, Dominic, Ray, it's over. Nobody cares. You know, you ruined the career of Buddy Murphy. Like, to be quite honest, like, the whole point and the whole end game to that Mysterio Seth Rollins program was seemingly to have Buddy Murphy as the breakout star and a babyface turn. And we all know how much SmackDown needs babyfaces. And we have just not seen Buddy Murphy in, I want to say, 5 weeks now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they realized that the love angle with him and Alicia was stupid and dumb and really not a smart path to go down. And they're just making him disappear from our minds and going to bring him back when we've all seemingly forgotten about that atrocity of a program that they had following the Rey Mysterio Seth Rollins angle. But I just feel like right now everything the Mysterios touch turns to bleep. And I'm not just saying that because I resent them and what they did with Mysterio and Seth Rollins and for how long it lasted, but it's just they have to stop. Baron Corbin is better than this. Buddy Murphy's better than this. Seth Rollins was certainly better than this. And they really just need to go away. If Dominic really has intentions of being a professional wrestler, by all means, send him to NXT, have him work on his promo skills, repackage him as his own superstar, not as just his dad's sidekick. And as for Rey Mysterio, like, I don't know what his contract situation is, but I don't want to see him anymore. I don't want to see Rey Mysterio anymore. It's not fun. He's a bad promo. He can't compete for a relevant championship anymore. The character's been beaten to death. Like, just go away. Let Baron Corbin do something more relevant, challenge for a mid-card championship. Let Buddy Murphy go off on his own and become a babyface, hopefully in the upper mid-card in the not-so-distant future whenever he does return. Let Seth Rollins feud with someone else for the first time in 10 months. Like, please, let's just go away from the Mysterios. Please. If you want to bring Dominic back up in a couple years after some seasoning in NXT, by all means do so. But in the here and now, they have to go away. Well, I'm going to stop myself there because I felt a rant building up. But I'm learning how to control it. So it's certainly not as bad as my rant was a few months back at this point when I completely blew a gasket on the Mysterio family. But that's enough of the current product, and let's get into the reason you are here, and that is for Rivalries. And we are covering Brock Lesnar versus Triple H from 2012 and 2013. And this was a rivalry that I feel like sometimes gets glossed over a bit for numerous reasons. For one, it was, for all intents and purposes, Brock Lesnar's first program upon his return to the company for the first time in 8 years. You know, we all know that he walked away from the company following WrestleMania 20 in 2004. He went on to try out for the NFL, became one of the best competitors in UFC, the heavyweight champion there, a lot of bouts with Frank Mir. And then he returned to WrestleMania the Raw after, he returned to WWE the Raw after WrestleMania 28 and confronted John Cena, F5'd him, and along they went. And they met up at a match at Extreme Rules following this initial encounter between Lesnar and Cena. And what was one of the more bizarre booking decisions is that Lesnar lost that match to John Cena, his first match back in WWE. And I know that it was because Cena was coming off of a loss to The Rock at the WrestleMania that just preceded this pay-per-view. But I still always found it a bit bizarre that in Lesnar's inaugural match back in the company on his second tour of duty, he drops a big loss to John Cena. And it was a match that he pretty much dominated except for the end where Cena hit the the attitude adjustment on the steel steps, and then he got the victory. But following this match is when his program with Triple H really started. And you have to bear in mind, in all the years that Brock Lesnar and Triple H had been in the company at the same time, well, all the years, I guess the 2 years that they had both been in the company at the same time in Lesnar's initial run with WWE, they never crossed paths. I know that they had a house show match with in a triple threat contest with The Rock, I think in Australia, but they never had an on-screen program. You know, Lesnar was the face of SmackDown, Triple H was the face of Raw, and more times than not, they were simultaneously the respective world champions on each brand. So when they finally had an encounter on Monday Night Raw following Lesnar's loss at Extreme Rules, it was pretty intriguing to see them in the ring at the same time in a confrontational manner. And we didn't expect it to be confrontational right off the bat because Triple H was just transitioning into his full-time executive type of character. But things escalated quite quickly when Lesnar didn't like what he was hearing.
I'm out here to do what you're supposed to be out here to do, but you don't have the guts to do it. So I will. Brock, your days of holding up the WWE are through. The private jet that you flew in on here today will not be taking you back home unless you want to pay for it. That goes along with the limo that brought you here. If you want to take a limo back on your dime, go for it. You're not going to be getting a raise. You're not going to be getting treated special. You're not going to be getting any of that. Oh, and by the way, the name of this show always has and always will be Monday Night Raw. Period. Nobody is bigger than the WWE. Nobody is bigger than Raw, Brock. And if you want to be here, I will guarantee you that you will get everything that you have coming to you in the contract that you negotiated when you first came back. The contract that you negotiated with John Laurinaitis that I approved. Not the demands that you bullied out of John Laurinaitis last week, which he agreed to and did not have the authority to without me approving it.
So I'll stop it right there, and just to give you a bit of context into what is going on, Brock Lesnar, who was not with Paul Heyman when he first returned, and you quickly realize as to why Brock Lesnar really needs Paul Heyman. Go look at some of his promos before this particular one, before they brought back Paul Heyman by his side, and you get just why WWE has glued Heyman to the side of Brock upon his return in 2012. So following his loss to John Cena, he was making, just irrational demands to John Laurinaitis, who was in charge of Monday Night Raw at the time. Triple H comes out, who is really fresh into his executive gimmick. They first started down this path in the summer of 2011, so just about 10 or 11 months before this program took place, or this promo rather, between Lesnar and Triple H. And he was just coming off of his first loss to his second loss rather, to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 28. So what we were seeing here is that you still have a babyface wrestler, Triple H, being received by the crowd, but they're really trying to dip his toe into the executive managerial role. Like, he still had his long hair. And as long as Triple H still had his long hair, he was still the wrestler, to me at least, and I think for a lot of the fans. And he was just an overwhelming babyface at this point of his career, because after Triple H was just such a long-standing heel from, I would say, 2002 until just about 2007, 2008, after that, until he fully moved away from being a full-time competitor, he was just an overwhelming babyface, a legacy star for the fans. So you had this big monster heel in Brock making irrational demands and just unacceptable demands by the management, and Triple H comes out to play the babyface executive, but also kind of like that really cool legacy star. And I gotta say, when he first transitioned to the business executive gimmick, I found it really cool to see Triple H in that role. But you heard Triple H kind of laying down the law for Brock, saying that he's not gonna, get whatever he wants. But it was interesting how Brock received this information.
That's fine. If you want to take your ball and pack it away with your loss to John Cena, and you want to take all that and go home, I'm fine with that, Brock, but I don't think you want that, and I don't want that either. What's it going to be? You want to do this?
Hunter, I don't really think you're being reasonable. I really think you should reconsider.
John! I'm going to say this one time only. Shut up! We got a deal?
Hunter, I think you're being disrespectful now. And I think I may have to address this with the board of directors. You're being disrespectful.
I don't think that you understand. Oh my God! Wait a minute. Lesnar, that's the CEO that Lesnar's attacking. What is he doing? Somebody out here. Lesnar assaulting Triple H from behind, and he's munging him. That's the CEO of this company. Lesnar's attacking the CEO of the company. Brock Lesnar has snapped at Triple H trying to fight back in the game. And Lesnar. Oh, no. The Kimura. Mr. Kimura, the submission hold that Lesnar used on Cena last night. That severely damaged Cena's arm. And Lesnar's got it locked in on Triple H. Get in there. Somebody get in there. Break his arm. He's the CEO of this company. I think he may have broke his arm. He may have broke his arm. And look at this. Hope the R-Truth Sheamus Big Show.
So Brock clearly is not a fan of what Triple H is telling him, attacks him from behind, and subsequently breaks his arm, in quotation marks, with the Kimura lock, a maneuver that Brock was using a lot upon his return to WWE, and I think he should go back to using that. I feel like submissions from big heels are very good ways to tell a story, especially with his credentialed UFC background. So he breaks the arm of Triple H, and this starts on a program that builds for the succeeding couple of months. They bring back Paul Heyman, and he files a lawsuit against WWE, and then Stephanie McMahon gets involved. And it was just a lot of Brock Lesnar's story being told through the mouth and character of Paul Heyman, which we have been accustomed to for the last, 8 years since he's returned to WWE. And every time we see Brock, and every time we saw Brock following this segment with Triple H, it was with Paul Heyman by his side. So this took place in about early May, and we didn't see Brock a whole lot, if at all, until the middle of July. And essentially, Triple H kept lobbying for a match against Brock Lesnar, but Paul Heyman kept declining. And it led to an encounter between Paul Heyman and Triple H at the Raw 1000 episode in the middle of July. And Triple H had started the night with the DX reunion, so he was in full DX gimmick. But after that, he was determined to get an answer out of Paul Heyman as to whether or not he would get his match with Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, which was just about a month out at this point. And it took everything for Triple H, and not only Triple H, to finally get what he wanted.
Hey, I'm sorry, okay? You're 100% right, and I apologize to you. Because as Brock Lesnar's advocate, I did step over a line. I shouldn't talk about your children because actually, I feel sorry for your children. You ever hear the line, the sins of the father shall be visited upon the children? Yes.
Now, and I'm listening
Oh no. Whoa. I think Paul Heyman crossed the line.
me tell you one thing, Heyman. You do not ever speak about my children. Ever again. Do you understand that? If you really want to make things personal, let's call what these lawsuits are really all about. Because they're not about Brock Lesnar. They're about you. They're about you masking your failures as a businessman. Your failures at WCW. Your failures at ECW. And your failures at WWE. You call yourself a visionary? When it comes to my father, Vince McMahon, you're just looking in the rearview mirror.
Daddy? We're going to talk about Daddy now?
Shut up! At least my daddy had the guts a few years ago to step in the ring with my husband, which is more than I can say for Brock Lesnar. At least my kids will be proud of their father and their grandfather, unlike your children, Paul. Because your children are ashamed. They're ashamed of you. They're ashamed to be your children because they know that their father is nothing more than a professional parasite.
So I'll stop it right there for a bit, is that eventually, as you heard, Stephanie McMahon comes to the ring and tries to get exactly what her husband wants, a match with Brock Lesnar, because Paul Heyman was refusing. And no matter what Triple H did, no matter what he tried to say to Paul Heyman to goad Brock Lesnar coming out, they would not agree. And it took Stephanie McMahon coming out, insulting Paul Heyman, and then subsequently slapping him in the face to finally try and generate the reaction that they were looking for. And before we get to the ultimate culmination of this segment, I just want to talk about how unnatural is Stephanie McMahon as a babyface. My God, I think Triple H can play the babyface pretty well, although I think he's ultimately much better as a heel. But Stephanie McMahon was just absolutely atrocious in this role. Just so non-believable in this particular segment. And this was before the whole authority gimmick, well before the Yes movement when they screwed over Daniel Bryan. You know, we really had not seen Stephanie McMahon a whole lot in this role. So they were still, I guess, really trying to test the waters on whether or not she'd be a babyface or a heel. And this was even a couple years before Shane McMahon eventually returned. And he, more times than not, played the babyface of all the McMahon figureheads in WWE. So yeah, it was just never a good look for Stephanie McMahon playing the babyface. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of her on-screen character at all, but there's no doubt that whether or if she has to play one or the other, she is much more suited to be a heel. But after all the hard work Triple H did, and then Stephanie McMahon coming out slapping Paul Heyman in the face, they finally got the answer they were looking for.
See your husband get hurt? You want to see your husband's career end? Is that what you want to see? Huh? You want to see your husband fight Brock Lesnar? You got it! It's on! You and Brock at SummerSlam! It's on! Daddy's little girl, Stephanie, you always get what you want. I fell for it. You always get exactly what you want. It's what your father taught you. It's what you teach your children. Is that the lesson you...
Oh my God, oh Lord. And look at this. Stephanie and Triple H get her assaulting Paul Heyman. Get her. This is going to be a huge lawsuit. Oh boy. Here comes the pain. Brock Lesnar. The beast is here. This cannot be good. No, not at all. But Stephanie's got to get out of the ring. Yeah. Stephanie's got to get out of the ring. Here comes Lesnar. Everybody and Lesnar. Right after Triple H. Lesnar picked Triple H off his feet. And Lesnar's attacking the game. Decimating the game. And Triple H fighting back. Here comes Triple H. Toe to toe. Fist to fist. Lesnar and Triple H. Watch out. The brawl has ensued. You knew this was coming. This has been building for months. Both of these guys landing some huge shots here. Wait a minute, Triple H! He's not Lesnar out of the ring! Triple H is standing tall! Do you believe that? The game just knocked Brock Lesnar out of his ring!
So after they finally get the answer they want, Brock Lesnar comes to the ring after Stephanie McMahon attacks Paul Heyman yet again, and him and Triple H brawl, Triple H getting the upper hand on him, and the stage is set for their clash at SummerSlam. And over the following couple of weeks, you see Brock Lesnar break the arm of Shawn Michaels that really make this program personal between the two of them, if it already was not. And at SummerSlam, Brock Lesnar gets the win and again breaks the arm of Triple H. And we seemingly got the end to this story as Brock Lesnar gets his big win upon his return, his first massive win after losing to John Cena, and beating Triple H seems like a big way to do that. And then we don't see these two cross paths for a good portion of 6 months. You know, Triple H goes away completely. Over the time of him away, we see reports of him cutting his hair and pictures of him that his hair is cut. And we think that, okay, this may be the end of Triple H 100% as an in-ring competitor. But in the winter of 2013, Brock Lesnar F5s Vince McMahon and hospitalizes him. And this is when the wheels started turning for a lot of fans, or at least myself, that maybe the program between Triple H and McMahon wasn't quite done yet. And on a specific Raw, Vince McMahon comes back on a crutch, nursing that injury that he had suffered at the hands of the F5 of Brock Lesnar, to face off against Paul Heyman in a fight. But before this fight could really get underway between the two of these guys, Brock Lesnar made his presence felt.
Are you kidding me? Well, I cannot say that we're surprised that Brock Lesnar is here. He's been represented by Paul Heyman for years now, and he is now an active part of the WWE roster. Oh my! Certainly not backing up, as a matter of fact. And Lesnar going after Triple H, and here we go. And the fight is on. Triple H and Lesnar. A brawl in Dallas. Well, you wouldn't have expected anything else. Oh, look at this. And now Lesnar. Lesnar with a UFC background. Accustomed to this style of fighting. Triple H, remember, twice has had his arm broken by this man. This is an all-out fight here. Triple H driving Lesnar into the steel post. Oh, man, that may be a difference maker. Lesnar's head bouncing off the steel post. It did, it might. And again, he's opened up. Lesnar opened up with his skull. Collided with a steel post. Look at Lesnar with nowhere to go. Driven straight into the timekeeper's area. Triple H. The demon inside him has been released!
So right when Brock Lesnar was about to once again attack Mr. McMahon, Triple H comes out to make the save, and it's the first time we see Triple H for the first time in 6 months since Brock Lesnar broke his arm and got the victory on him at SummerSlam. So this leads to a rematch at WrestleMania, no holds barred contest between the two of them, which Triple H gets the victory on, the big win for Triple H, and basically making this a 1-1 tie. And it ultimately culminates at a steel cage match, the rubber match, finally break the tie between these two. And this was a pretty gruesome match, and Paul Heyman got involved, and it culminated with Brock Lesnar getting the victory after cracking Triple H in the face, or in the jaw rather, with a sledgehammer, hitting him with the F5. And the lasting image of Triple H like dragging himself out of the ring, like they really honed in on that, and like focused on how badly Brock Lesnar beat down Triple H in this particular contest. And this really kind of solidified Brock as a main event contender for the foreseeable future. Because after this is when he kind of went on his reign of terror here in WWE. Because over the course of the following year, he beat CM Punk at SummerSlam, and they had a program that lasted a couple pay-per-views. He beat Mark Henry. He beat The Big Show. He ended the streak for The Undertaker at WrestleMania in 2014. At SummerSlam, at the following SummerSlam in 2014, he beat John Cena for the Undisputed Championship that was just recently unified, and then held that belt all the way until 2015 at WrestleMania 31. So it was almost a full 24-month-long stretch here that Brock was billed as an unstoppable force. Like, I don't think we saw him lose until WrestleMania 31 when he dropped the belt after the Seth Rollins cash-in in the main event with him and Roman Reigns. And even at that, Brock Lesnar wasn't even the guy who took the pinfall. So we didn't see Brock Lesnar get pinned until, I want to say, SummerSlam 2015. I think that was the next time he got pinned, when The Undertaker cost him the Undisputed Championship against Seth Rollins. So following WrestleMania 29 in April of 2013, it took close to 30 months before we saw Brock get pinned. And that all kick-started with this victory over Triple H in the steel cage at Extreme Rules 2013. And in from Triple H's perspective, rather, this was pretty much the last program he had as an in-ring competitor. Because, yeah, before this, he was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door into the office of WWE. But following this program, when he lost to Brock clean inside the cage, it was the loss that really sent him into the front office for WWE, and he went full steam ahead with that authority gimmick. Because just a few months following this loss and this defeat, he turned heel and aligned himself with Randy Orton, and the authority whole gimmick started up against Daniel Bryan. And then he didn't get back into a wrestling ring until WrestleMania 30 in 2014 against Daniel Bryan. So this was a big turning point for both of their respective careers, because on one hand you had Brock, who was poised to go on a 24-month reign of terror of just destroying everything in his path. And you had Triple H, who was just kicking off his brand new role as the authority figure, the heel authority figure on Raw, that would kind of rule with an iron fist for the succeeding 24 months. Just about the same amount of time that Brock went on his reign of terror, because the time that the authority was running roughshod on Monday Night Raw, you had Brock doing the same thing but in the wrestling ring. And I remember in the summer of 2015, they actually shook hands after they brought Brock back from a suspension that Stephanie McMahon had handed to him following WrestleMania 31. So yeah, this program was important in a lot of ways for both of their careers, as they both went in different directions, but they both took massive turns for the better in my mind. Because I think that, I know a lot of people don't like Brock Lesnar, but you have to understand that for the casual fan, Brock Lesnar is the biggest draw, and still is today the biggest draw that WWE has, and has been since he returned. Maybe not so much exactly when he returned, because when he first came back in 2012, John Cena was still at the peak of his career. The Rock was back on a semi-regular basis, so you still had those two guys competing. But nowadays, with John Cena gone and The Rock completely out of WWE, you know, who is a bigger draw for the casual fan and a worldwide audience than Brock Lesnar? Like, I know the hardcore wrestling fans and the wrestling purists will argue that, you know, he only has 5 moves and his matches aren't good and this, that, and the other thing, part-timer. But look, I'm a hardcore wrestling fan, but I gotta say that every time Brock comes back, he piques my interest. And I think one thing about Brock that people don't give him enough credit for is how good of a worker he is and how many people he's put over since he came back to the company. Like, at WrestleMania alone, he has put over Seth Rollins, Triple H, although Triple H didn't need it, and Drew McIntyre. And you could argue that he put over Roman Reigns as well, just not at a WrestleMania. And I think the only reason he didn't put Roman Reigns over at WrestleMania 34 was strictly for the fact that everyone expected Roman Reigns to go over, and Vince McMahon tried to swerve us. So they drawed it out up until SummerSlam that succeeded that WrestleMania in the summer of 2018. So look, I really don't think that Brock gets a fair rap here from a lot of hardcore fans because, he's booked as he should be. He shouldn't be on Monday Night Raw every week. His matches shouldn't be quote-unquote 5-star classics. He is a real-life fighter. He's a real-life ass kicker, and that's how he's booked, and as he should, because he has real-life credentials. So what good would it do with him being booked in a 50-50 manner against guys who don't have that background? And, a lot of people really raged when he beat Kofi Kingston in 9 seconds on the first ever SmackDown on Fox in October of 2019. But I gotta say, I loved it. It was one of the best booking decisions I've ever seen because you know why? It made sense. It made sense that Brock Lesnar would destroy Kofi Kingston in under 10 seconds. And that's the thing I look for in wrestling. I look for things that make sense. I look for things that are realistic. I look for things that I can relate to. And I'm sorry, but Kofi Kingston pushing Brock Lesnar to the limit is anything but realistic. So look, I'm a big fan of Brock Lesnar, and there's nothing anyone could say to make me change my mind. And I know there's a lot of you who hate him. I know there's a lot of you who probably think I'm out to lunch with that statement, but Brock Lesnar, even today, is the biggest thing WWE has going for them. And we haven't seen him in close to a year now. Who knows if we'll see him again until after this pandemic is over. But I think even with Roman Reigns and how good he's been in the last 5 or 6 months, cannot rival the star power that Brock Lesnar carries. And getting this big win over Triple H in a program that spanned over the course of 12 months pretty much, I think it was a big part in the years to come on building Brock Lesnar as a legitimate superstar in the wrestling business. Well, anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. You can get me on Twitter at ADemarco25. You can follow Matt on Twitter at wrestling_audio. As always, you can email him at realwwepodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments for me, be sure to email him or send me a DM. I always like to converse with you guys. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you next week.